We're going to get started. Thank you, one and all, and welcome to the Robert H. Jackson Center. This is an incredible partnership between two organizations, and salute to the National Comedy Center as it launches, and it's launched successfully and continues to launch something that's going to put Jamestown on the map and to bring all of you here, and this is an incredible opportunity. And I'm incredibly thrilled to have you here at the Robert Jackson Center, who was the answer to a recent Jeopardy question, named the only person in the history of the United States to be a Solicitor General, Attorney General, and a Justice of the Supreme Court. And who is Robert H. Jackson? And aside from that, you'll see around in this particular place various pictures where he was the chief American prosecutor at the Nuremberg trial. Think Goering, Hess, Ribbentrop. That was Robert Jackson from here. And we honor him and we honor his legacy. And part and parcel of that, we look forward to honoring the fact that he was a justice of the Supreme Court, and the First Amendment was very much part of his jurisprudence, and we're going to get the chance to see models of that today. I mean, where else can a guy who would say that when he makes arguments before a court, as comedians sometimes make presentations, first came the one I planned, as I thought logical, coherent, and complete. Second was the one actually presented, interrupted, incoherent, disjointed, disappointing. The third was an utterly devastating argument that I thought of only after going to bed that night. That's Jackson. That's a little humor. That's all I was given, was one story. So I am thrilled. And by the way, just a couple of housekeeping matters, because this is a huge house, and we assured the City of Jamestown Building Code we are not exceeding our fire limits. So if anybody asks, we did not exceed the fire limits. There is an exit up to my right, your left, as an exit here. There's an exit there. I would ask that, because this is all being broadcast, silence your telephones. And I'm honored to present at this time the Executive Director of the National Comedy Center and our spokesperson extraordinaire, Journey Gunderson. Journey?
Thank you, Greg. Let's make sure this can be heard. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to the National Comedy Center Dialogue, Comedy and Freedom of Speech, the Legacy of Lenny Bruce. All right. In case you haven't noticed, there's someone in the room that bears a striking resemblance to Mr. Bruce, and I can't help but see him in my periphery and acknowledge him. Would you like to stand? Ronnie, who plays Mr. Lenny Bruce. See him afterward to find out how you can catch his performances as Lenny Bruce. It's uncanny and pretty remarkable. The National Comedy Center is the first cultural institution and visitor attraction dedicated to telling the vital story of comedy in America. As such, it is our mission to share the story of Lenny Bruce, not just a pillar of comedy, but a pillar of freedom of speech and the First Amendment. Before we get started, it's my pleasure just to welcome our moderator and panelists to the stage with us before we kind of begin the introduction. So please welcome Stephen J. Morrison, Kitty Bruce, Paul Cambria, and Mr. Lewis Black. Today's conversation takes place as part of the grand opening of the National Comedy Center, and I'm pleased to say just a couple of hours after I had the privilege of welcoming Kitty Bruce to cut the ribbon on the National Comedy Center's exhibit dedicated to the legacy of Lenny Bruce. I'm also honored and pleased to report that the National Comedy Center is now in partnership with the Lenny Bruce Memorial Foundation, proceeds of which are put toward helping those struggling with alcohol and drug addiction into treatment. And now it's my pleasure to introduce your moderator for this afternoon's conversation. Stephen J. Morrison has spent a lot of time around comedy over the past few years. As the executive producer of CNN's The History of Comedy, Stephen conducted interviews with over 120 creators of comedy and produced 14 episodes about several different unique facets of the art form, which Stephen told me to mention is currently airing Sunday nights at 10 on CNN. Woo! In fact, I first met Stephen 2 years ago when he came to town during the Lucille Ball Comedy Festival to interview none other than Mr. Mark Russell, who I see in the crowd with us here today. Nominated for 3 Emmys over the course of his career, Stephen has most recently joined the National Comedy Center as the executive producer of Exhibit Media. So if you've been to the museum and seen it playing on a monitor or written on a wall, chances are it went through Stephen's team that has been working on this project from Los Angeles over the course of the last 13 months.
Thanks, Steve.
I had an inkling that Stephen Morrison might be the right man for the job when it came to leading the storytelling of the National Comedy Center, and one of the pivotal moments in achieving that clarity was after the episode of CNN's History of Comedy that covered Lenny Bruce. I had met Kitty. She had been to Jamestown. We did a panel discussion once before, and after she saw that episode, she called me and said, "That man Stephen who interviewed me, no one has ever, and many people have tried, no one has ever told my father's story that well." And it put me into tears. And she said, "No one has ever done it that well, and he's the guy." And so that really put things over the top for us here at the National Comedy Center.
Thank you, Terry.
And so without further ado, I'll let you get to the conversation today and hand things over to your deft moderator, Mr. Stephen J. Morrison.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Good afternoon, folks. I'm thrilled to be here, and welcome to this conversation about comedy and the First Amendment. I'm just going to formally introduce the people on our panel. You've heard a little bit about them. Some of you know them personally. Kitty Bruce is the daughter of Lenny Bruce and CEO and founder of the Lenny Bruce Memorial Foundation, which she founded in 2008. The foundation combats alcohol and drug addiction with scholarships and education and focuses on providing scholarships for those in need of treatment who don't have the funds or insurance to get the help that they should get. Working closely with sober houses and treatment programs, Kitty oversees many aspects of addiction service and works with approved facilities designed to save lives. Her goal is to establish educational modules that work under the Lenny Bruce guidelines for long-term success. Happily for me, as you just heard, I've been able to collaborate with Kitty in both projects, The History of Comedy and work at the National Comedy Center, which we have just seen together, Kitty, for the first time, and I'm really hoping that all of you get the chance to go over. It's located appropriately in the Blue Room downstairs, so you have to be 18, but it is definitely worth your time, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoy putting it together. Welcome, Kitty.
Thank you.
Mr. Paul Cambria is recognized as one of the nation's preeminent attorneys practicing in New York, California, Washington, D.C. Among other specialties, there are too many to list here, he focuses his practice in the areas of constitutional and First Amendment law and is a member and past president of the First Amendment Trial Lawyers Association. Mr. Cambria built a strong reputation for successfully representing individuals and businesses in complex, high-profile cases at all levels of the courts, including state, federal, and arguing several cases in front of the United States Supreme Court, representing many prominent individuals, including the publisher Larry Flynt, and musicians. There's a reason he's here today, folks. And some other people that sometimes get into trouble with the First Amendment, musicians, including guys like DMX and Marilyn Manson. So he's no stranger to this topic or taking on difficult, high-profile, challenging cases. Welcome, Paul. This is very formal, Louis. I hope you'll accept my apology in advance, but
Just keep it short.
stand-up comedian, actor, playwright, and author Louis Black told me a while ago that it was some time ago that he discovered that he's funniest when he's angry. And happily for us, over the course of many, many years, we also know that to be true. So great to have you here. As the playwright in residence at Manhattan's West Bank Cafe's downstairs theater bar, he's overseen the development of more than 1,000 plays, as well as his own original works. And whether it was his recurring segment on The Daily Show, Back in Black, or his countless stand-up specials recorded for HBO and Comedy Central, including Emmy nominations, Louis received the Best Male Stand-Up at the American Comedy Awards in 2001, and not content to just localize his talent, has also acted in many movies, including Man of the Year with Robin Williams, and animated features that you and I know and love, like Inside Out. Louis has received 5 Grammy nominations and 2 wins for his critically acclaimed comedy albums, and as an author has garnered critical praise as well as commercial success and several weeks on the New York Times bestsellers list for his books Nothing Sacred, Me of Little Faith, and I'm Dreaming of a Black Christmas. I've been very lucky to work with Louis and interview him several times for both the History of Comedy and the National Comedy Center, and it's my pleasure to welcome Louis Black. Great. Okay, finally, now to the main event. I am very excited to talk to these people in particular about comedy and the First Amendment. And because we have an expert on the panel, not to get into too deep dive on history, I want to ask you, Paul, the First Amendment. We take it for granted. We think we know what it is. But what, in your words, is it, and why did it seem like a good idea at the time?
Well, the very first thing you need to understand, it was the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And as we know, the first 10 are called the Bill of Rights, so it's the first. And what people don't understand sometimes is I can't violate your First Amendment or your First Amendment. It protects you against the government. The Bill of Rights protects you against the government, not person to person. Person to person, we sue each other for defamation or what have you. But the First Amendment protects us against the government, and it covers the following. You should be able to, and at the time that we suffered through the revolution and so on, we wanted to speak out against the king, against government, to be able to do that freely and openly without punishment from the government. And of course, that's what that amendment was designed to do, to allow us to speak freely, to not be punished for diverse thoughts, for thoughts that may not be popular, for thoughts that may even be hateful, but nevertheless are protected. And not only that, the amendment also covers freedom of religion and the separation of religion from government. So that basically is what it is. And as it relates to all of this, Lenny, of course, and others who were trailblazers were prosecuted by the government for mere words. And Lenny successfully convicted for mere words, the only case in New York history where mere words resulted in an obscenity conviction. And things have of course, changed,
Thank
luckily.
Louis, I know you've cited many times Lenny Bruce as an influence, and I recently reread the preface that you wrote for his re-released book, How to Talk Dirty and Influence People, which is recommended reading. You said that he didn't just push the boundaries, he obliterated them, and it changed the way I looked at life. What, as a young comic and as a writer, what resonated with you when you first were exposed to Lenny Bruce?
The first thing was I'd read the book and I'd listened to a little of his stuff, and I knew as a comic, and which I wasn't really thinking I'd be a comic, but I was doing stand-up from time to time, and I knew I couldn't listen to a lot of him because I just would want to be him. And that's a big fucking mistake. Okay? So it would just not be the thing to do. You just don't do that. I realized that would become my persona. It was it was just so it spoke to me so directly on so many levels, and he was going after things at the time which are nothing now to us, but at the time, like the church, which is like still like you know, the church, like the mother church, and he did this bit about, you know, Christ and Moses wandered down to St. Patrick's Cathedral, and they go through Spanish Harlem, and he just tells this story. And by the end of it, I'm like laughing and crying, you know, and it's kind of like, wow, I can't believe he's saying this in public, and he's saying it in a comedy club, and that these people are laughing. And it was that kind of thing that I thought, you know, if I was going to write or if I was going to talk about things, that's what I wanted to do, was to be able to see that clearly. And what made his greatness was it was simple. None of this was complicated. He saw that these people had nothing. He walks into the church and sees that they have everything, and then and then he's got, I guess it's Bishop Sheen, I forget who's, Spellman. Is looking down, and they look at the back, and there are two guys in the back glowing, and and they can't remember their names. They're looking, it's Christ and Moses. They can't remember their names. I'm going to repeat that until you get the joke. So that was the kind of stuff that really, drove me into put me in the lane that I wanted to be in.
Well, and I think the fascinating thing as I learn more and more about this subject, and I've been lucky enough to be doing it over the past few years, is, one of the things they say is you don't necessarily know what your freedoms are until they're tested. And Kitty, I want you to tell me a little bit about what comedy was like at the time, and why did Lenny choose to do this, which was not being done? What was his motivation to do? What was happening at the time? Why did his work stand out?
A lot of my father's comedy was based on his childhood, his adulthood, and the in-between-hood. And normally people laugh at what they can relate to. It was a transition. There was different levels that my father went through. First, it was the ha-ha-ha. And that you had to repeat a joke every 15 minutes. I think it was a get a laugh every 15 minutes, some sort of panel or something like that. But when he came home from the Second World War, and he was, at Anzio, and there was black soldiers there spilling their blood, just like the white guys. And then he comes home, and the same guy that they fought with can't sit down at a counter. No blacks. You can't come in here. You have a different water fountain. And he couldn't believe, first of all, that it was happening. Second of all, how unjust it was. Then we take my father's father. He was a foot doctor, like if you have there's something wrong with your feet, and he makes shoes to, right? And my grandfather was a bigot. And my dad and my mom came to visit one weekend, and they had with them their friend Hector, who was Puerto Rican. And my grandfather threw a fit. Harriet, Leonard, out of my house. Now you're going out of my house. You can't bring those people here. So that got my dad fueled up. Then my grandma Sally promised him a bar mitzvah. Now my father's all excited about this party. There's going to be a party. And the rabbi wouldn't do it because my grandma didn't have enough money. So now he's got a resentment from way back. The type of comedy that was going on in that era was Take My Wife, Please, very glossed over material and never discussing anything that was topical. There were few comedians, however, satirists, Mort Saul, Dick Gregory at the time, that were approaching certain subject matter. The best way I could describe the kind of comedy and how he moved on was at that particular time in the 50s, you saw the June Cleavers, hello dear, and they give their husband a cocktail and the slippers, and she's waiting by the door, and with the pearl necklace. And my father literally came and rolled, and he busted that necklace straight off. And because of that, it caused, who is this guy? And he was talking about things in everyday life that he could not understand. So that's how he began to go in the direction that he went.
I love that he, as most great stand-up comedians are they're very observant. I tend to see that over and over again. And he took his observation and his disgust with the hypocrisy, whether it was about race or about the church, and turned it into humor and put it on stage. Paul, I want to ask you a question about, most of us feel it's a no-brainer. The First Amendment, we live in America, where we have the right to free speech, and yet we do accept these few exceptions. There's been, don't yell fire in a theater. People say, like, well, shouldn't I be able to joke about a bomb at the TSA? It's like, well, you can, I guess, if you want, but I wouldn't. How do you reconcile the First Amendment that goes back to 1791 and the introduction of obscenity laws? Because where we're going to get to here is obviously how the authorities tried to bring down Lenny Bruce. How do you square the circle with the need for obscenity laws? You know a lot about that field, and the First Amendment.
Well, obscenity laws have been around for a long, long time, starting with the Comstock Act, and there are always those puritanicals who are in power, and they're the ones that are responsible for the, if you will, oppression of free speech. And they are the holier-than-thous, and it's kind of interesting because over the years, in a lot of these cases that we've had, the holier-than-thous turn out to have all sorts of skeletons in their closets and all kinds of problems. I'll give you an example. We had a case in Florida, and the judge was as nasty as could be. The prosecutors were horrible. It was a Larry Flint type case. And in our digging, lo and behold, we find out the judge is a major purchaser of adult products online. And one of the newspapers finally got a hold of it. And remember, the newspaper helps protect the First Amendment and the free, robust exchange of ideas. They got a hold of it. The judge committed suicide. I mean, this is how serious these things become. but it's always the censors. In Lenny's case, and there's one thing, if I achieve anything today, I want to give him credit for what he did. He was convicted in New York. Interesting, he was acquitted in San Francisco. There was a hung jury for acquittal, majority for acquittal, in Los Angeles. He was convicted in Illinois, but it was reversed because the Illinois courts recognized the latest Supreme Court decision that said if it has serious value, social value, it's protected. They recognized it. Lenny was convicted. The co-defendant was Solomon, who owned the club, the Cafe A Go-Go. He and his wife were prosecuted as well. Lenny unfortunately passed away before the appeal was completed. When the appeal was completed, the New York court, to its credit, both the courts, did what the trial court wouldn't do and recognized what the law was. And the law said if it has redeeming value, it's protected by the First Amendment. So what he achieved was to take satirical, blue, in-your-face, smack-your-face around humor and political commentary and make it protected or recognized as being protected by the First Amendment. And that allowed the George Carlins and the Louis Blacks and all the others who thrill us with this very clever and entertainment that they have. And they can do it now, and we don't fear, they don't fear, that they're going to be arrested. Lenny was arrested. In fact, he used to wear a trench coat because he was ready to be carried off.
All the time.
And he'd be in the middle of a performance, and they'd put the cuffs on him and take him out. And it was all by a fellow named Q. It was spelled with a K, Richard Q. And he was the one. He ran for DA, and he lost that because of prosecuting Lenny. And all these great Hollywood stars and Broadway stars and so on came to Lenny's defense. Paul Newman, Richard Burton, Dorothy Kilgallen at the time was one of the witnesses and so on. And what happened was he allowed all these other people to entertain us with things we choose to hear as adults. So this is Lenny Bruce. You are the man. That was great. Absolutely great.
I'm glad the way you finished that when you said it's what we choose to hear.
Choose to hear.
The thing that's remarkable, and there's I had a real light bulb moment when I was going over the Lenny Bruce story, is that this wasn't a guy with a megaphone in front of City Hall or leading a march with torches on the Capitol. He's in a nightclub with 200 people who all had one thing in common.
Paid to be there and wanted to be there.
Exactly, to see the material he was presenting
Right.
on stage.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Louis, you've had a lot of experience in many different venues, including clubs, big and small. What is it about the comedian, do you think, that scares the authorities, or is comedy a canary in a coal mine with respect to the First Amendment story, even after Lenny Bruce won the battle for us?
Well, first off, a comic wouldn't go into a coal mine. That much I know. I'm not quite sure what you mean. I should have
Have
asked
they
you.
been the tip of the spear with respect to, fighting? I'll give you a perfect example. Recently, Michelle Wolf, who
Right.
you all know,
Yeah.
made the news because of her comments at White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me, we're having this conversation about comedy and the First Amendment. Lenny's case is over 50 years old. Michelle Wolf at the Correspondents' Dinner less than 4 months ago. And she said, one of her quotes was, my thought is that if you couch it in a joke, you should be able to say whatever you want. And the first thing that struck me was, I don't think you have to couch it in a joke.
No.
But she did, and part of the conversation here is comedians have always wanted to say whatever they want. Lenny proved that it wasn't illegal, so no one's going to jail anymore. But the reason I cite this Michelle Wolf case
Right.
versus saying something controversial in a club is the President of the United States responded And so she's not thrown in jail, but when you talk about career impact, losing jobs, what's your sense of when we're in this crazy place where the president can respond to
Well,
what
yeah,
he
I mean,
needs?
what you've got, I mean, it isn't so much, it's that whole world of social media, which has created a different kind of a thing to it, you know. So I do, a while back, I do the correspondence dinner, and there's not a big social media thing when I do the correspondence dinner. So there's no, and I was kind of, and I didn't certainly cross the lines. I've worked Washington too much. I'm not playing that room. And you got Dick Cheney to your right and Mitch McConnell to your left. Okay, you're not gonna. No. Okay, it's not gonna happen. It's not. We're not gonna. Nothing is gonna be won. I'm trying to entertain the back of the room, and because you know, and besides this, Dick Cheney is laughing, which makes me think, wow, I must not be funny anymore. It doesn't affect that, you know, and then it became more and more about like when Imus does it, there's a big backlash. When she does it, there's a big backlash. But the backlash doesn't really come from authority. The backlash comes from people standing around who kind of go, you know, this is my team. And you fucked with my team, you know? It's like, you know, it's become like a football game or something. So they're all yelling at Michelle Wolf, and it really isn't like, and for all that, you know, but she's not going to lose a job because of it, because the other side is going to tune in, because their team has her. And they, you know, and so she's going to. So the social media thing works. You know, it's a double-edged sword. But it changes things. What I found interesting, I was saying, and I wonder what you think about this, is that social media. When Lenny gets nailed because the cop reads his transcript, the cop reads his his jokes. And if you go see comedy karaoke at the National Comedy Center and watch those people just destroy stuff, okay? And these are people who love the people that they're reading. So you got cops who really kind of are basically arrested this guy and want him nailed, and so they're reading it like blah 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 blah. So they're destroying him. But if there was a smartphone in the room, if there was a bunch of smartphones in that room, it wouldn't have happened. Because people would have seen, there's a whole group of people who would have seen what it was he was doing, as opposed to just that literally small group that was watching it. But the double-edged sword comes because of that. You've got, that would help him, but in the end, it also, you know, because people bring those smartphones into a club, they basically can get you the other way. And you can get screwed because somebody's got the smartphone in the room. Yeah. And because I get things on my social media thing where it'll be kind of edited in a way, and people never go to look at what it was I said. They just look at the little edit thing and respond to like the edit thing. You have to punch this to go to the next place to see what I said. So, you know, I think in the end it's. It would have been a different world, you know, now. And I think what protects that First Amendment now is that kind of you know, as much as I hate to say, you know, the whole world is watching, it makes a difference. You know, and it's like high school. It is. It's all high school. We're all walking down the hallway. Did you hear what he said? He said schmuck. Oh, boy. Horace said schmuck in the 3rd grade in that class. And that's what it's like. And then everybody's going, yeah, he said schmuck. He said schmuck.
Fingers going.
Well, and the thing that was most shocking to me about hearing for the first time that police were reading transcripts in the courtroom, these weren't official transcripts that took down. These were police that were like jotting down notes. So not only were they butchering the routine,
yeah,
they were butchering the routine twice in the transcription and the reading back.
Well, they left words out. They said, "Oh, this is indecipherable," And Lenny said to his lawyer, well, no, it's not. I can tell you what that word was. And the lawyer said it doesn't matter, and Lenny fired him.
Yeah.
Before I came here, I was going through stacks of paper, and I came across my father talking about what happened in 1964 at the Cafe A Go-Go bust. So apparently, this is what went down. My father, from April the 1st to April the 7th, did many shows. During that time, the district attorney in New York, the judge, and an Officer LePage all signed off on the following. The policeman, first of all, Howie Solomon, the owner of the club, was not familiar with electronic tape recordings. And so the sound was bad, and certain words that were being recorded, they were indecipherable. My father couldn't even understand what they were. That's how bad the sound was. So now the club owners get whacked, and now they're under indictment. And then there was a process of elimination. All of a sudden, the district attorney decides, the judge, they were all in on it, for lack of a better way to explain it. But the district attorney got the judge to put an order for the DA to confiscate those tapes. So now they're holding evidence. They're tampering with evidence in the following way. Officer LePage said that he was there for all the performances. Officer LePage was not there. But the DA, the judge, the officer, and another judge, they put their signature there. Now this continues. My father goes before the Supreme Court, and he is there in substance. And he is trying all he wanted to do. At the end, when he kept talking about his cases and talking about his cases, I don't think it was as much that he was exhausted. He was reaching out to the people that at least came to see him to explain to them, this is what's happening. Do you see what's happening? And now it's all into evidence. There's tampering of evidence, they're signing things, they're saying that they saw things they never saw, they recorded things that were indecipherable. Nobody could tell anything. And then he gets convicted of 3 counts. And for each count, he received 4 months in the workhouse. So he's fighting not to be locked up. And during this time, he overdoses and he dies. So, and here's the thing. The same state of which we are in right now brought charges against my father, and we're convicting him. And then, here's the beauty of it. The same state, in 2003, Governor Michael Pataki pardons my father. So now, the outcome is overturned. And I found it even better, and by the way, that pardon, it's in the National Comedy Center, and I felt it was very important to put there. And his trench coat, because yes, he was dragged off the stage all the time, and he got a warning from the DA one time, Lenny, if you say those words, I'm just telling you now, if you say those words, you better bring a toothbrush. So he was aware. But the beauty, here's the capper. There's a comedy center in the same state, right? Getting all this, the head nodding, so he's still talking, and he's still here, and in the end, they still can't shut him up.
So happy you told that story, and I didn't realize, I know the trench coat was famous. I didn't know that he didn't always wear a trench coat on stage. That was something that he started doing because he knew he wasn't leaving from the dressing room, which I think is remarkable. So to have the Pardon side by side with the trench coat and his typewriter in a glass case at the National Comedy Center is an incredibly generous gift to the center. Thank you for that, Katie. I'm interested, you know, I think it goes without saying, but I'm lucky enough in the dozens and dozens of interviews that I've conducted that comedians today all realize that they stand on the shoulders of those who came before. The debt of gratitude, Louis, how do you put into context, still to this day, what young comedians need to know about what they're doing and the environment in which they're doing it that didn't always exist before?
You know, that's part of the reason I wanted to see this done, because you have to have that sense of, you know, we got to where we got to. You know, it's if you're an artist, you're going to go back and study A, B, C, and D. If you're, you know, those guys or those women, and you're going to study, you know, for whatever it is, it's just vital to know what it was that you were, you know, fighting against, you know, or what it was that you were dealing with, what George dealt with, and what, you know, Pryor dealt with, and what Lenny dealt with, and then the others about Red Fox. Red Fox didn't have to deal with it because they had a totally different circuit where, you know, what white cop was going to walk in there. So, you know, there's a, but for me, it's been, I've never felt, but we were, you know, but it's still, now it's television. It's still like go on TV, and it's still like, you go to any other country on earth and you can say words. In our country, it's like, you know, you can't say those words, which is, you know, you can more and more on certain things, but, you know, there's still that line that needs to be kind of, and it's always, you're just going to always push until it's open. And I'll tell you just a great story about sort of censorship that I experienced of which I've had very little. It's mostly the guys, the CBS, or this was, I guess, Conan, so it was NBC. Okay. And I did a thing about some guy had a lot of money, and he bought an umbrella stand for like $12,000 or something. And so my joke was that I thought that it was, you know, why would you pay that much money for an umbrella stand? Most of us have that, and it's called a bathtub. And, and I said, $12,000? They said it must have been made out of Martha Stewart's vagina. So that was the joke. And the woman calls up, I get a call from Standards and Practices, or whatever they call it, and she says, you know, Mr. Black, we got this joke, and you refer to Martha Stewart's vagina. Couldn't you find another word? I said that's a medical term. It's like, you know, it's like penis. It's like a medical term. You know, you wouldn't say cock. You'd say penis. Vagina. I said, what word would you use? And she literally paused and went, what about cooch? And I said, the problem with that word choice is it makes it sound like I've been familiar with it. So we got to use vagina. And that made my parents' day.
Well, it seems to me to be a bit ironic that Lenny Bruce made an incredible point by pointing out the hypocrisy of things like the church and racism and things, and even this topic on censorship seems to be filled with hypocrisy. Yeah. Paul, I know that you would have tons of experience with it's the eye of the beholder, but this panel was subtitled Comedy in the First Amendment, How Far is Too Far and Who Decides? Tell me about the importance of that question, who decides?
Well, it depends what medium you're in. Louis just spoke about television. The FCC is still the government, and so the First Amendment applies. And what they do there, the excuse they use for censorship, is that television is pervasive. It comes into all these homes. It isn't a matter of going into a theater, buying a ticket, knowing what you're going to get. And so children can be walking through the living room and all of a sudden, vagina comes out or whatever. And so they use that as their excuse to censor. Now, we have tonight the original Saturday Night Live cast. Some of them are here. I see Lorraine there. And think about what they did in television. And it was nice because they carved a niche out for us, because now it's like, okay, well, if it's after 8 o'clock, then it can be a little bit more risque, if you will, or edgy, etc. And so we keep pushing back that line. But remember, the line is always drawn by the people in power. What's improved about the obscenity area, and that's what Lenny was convicted of, is that it has to be taken as a whole now, so they couldn't do excerpts. The other thing is, the most important part about it is that now the obscenity test has an expansion joint in it. It's the only law with an expansion joint. And that expansion joint says, when measured against contemporary community standards, it cannot be patently offensive. What that means is it has to be acceptable by the average adult. So now that we have computers and all the rest of it, and we're so educated about all this, adults have a much higher tolerance than they've had in the past. So all these things are important, context and so on. So now we can go to juries and say, look, they walked into a club, let's assume there was, because these days there has to be a sexual component also. He was convicted, there was no sexual component. Now there has to be. But if there is, now you can say to a jury, which I've said several times, look, we're adults. We were in there. We consented. Take it in context. For the average adult, I allow you to be different from me, and you to be different from me. For us, that's the essence of the First Amendment. Difference. Difference. Not everybody likes country western music, right? But you don't ban it because the majority says, oh, we don't like country western music, right? Not everybody likes symphony music. You don't ban it, right? You say, you measure it this way. Is the average adult find that's acceptable for another adult? And if the answer is yes, the law goes away. The law is pushed back. And that's what people like this have done. Lenny, the Saturday Night Live people, Mr. Black and others, they keep pushing the people in power who want to make your choices back and say, let us be free, let us be adults, let us have differences of opinion. That's what we're all seeing here.
And in the reading I've done on the topic, it feels so interesting because you've got laws of the land where people can go to jail about something that is in itself not necessarily specifically defined, right? Paul, it's like obscene. What is obscene and what is not obscene?
The test for obscenity is the material doesn't depict or describe in a patently offensive way sexual conduct. It does not exceed the community standard, which is the second part of it. And the third part, that it doesn't appeal to a prurient interest in sex, which is a morbid or shameful interest in sex, and it doesn't lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. What the hell is that? What the hell is that? And for us, when we're talking to juries, I just go, look, they have to prove all three of those, okay? The second one says average adults finds it acceptable for average adults. Not kids, there aren't kids involved here. That's where we need to be. I don't want to go prurience and all this. They don't understand that. And the case, by the way, that got a reversal in Solomon, which is Lenny's case, was a case called Jacobellis versus Ohio. And you've heard the famous quote from Justice Potter Stewart. I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it, okay? Well, that was the case that also said that if it has value, if it has societal value, it is protected. And that's ultimately what happened.
Why the question who decides is so important, and when you say like
The
community standards,
the community decides.
but and that it should be all of us, but that people in power.
People in power bring the charges, and we have to stand up against the people in power. And what happens is, when you get into these jury situations, and people aren't always honest, and they're in a jury, and you'll get a younger juror, a male juror, and they'll say, and we've done focus groups on believe me, we've done it all. And you'll get a male juror who's sitting there going, shit, I thought that was great. And then, but there's a young lady who he's just met who's a fellow juror, and he goes, oh, that's disgusting. I'm very sorry. They're exploiting women, and it's just horrible. And he doesn't believe that at all. But he's in there putting that show on. So you got to cut through the show and get to them and say, look, be honest. You have to be honest. It's the only way it works.
I have just one last question about the law in the context of this, Paul, and that is that, we talked about the First Amendment guarantees the right to free speech. The obscenity laws were brought in, and that was a way that Lenny was prosecuted and persecuted. I'm recently troubled when, again, I'm not invoking Trump again, other than for the specific reason that he's saying, I'm looking at strengthening the libel laws so that I can sue anybody who says something that I don't think is fair. How do you respond to these sort of workarounds or things that try to assail what I consider the right to free speech?
Well, he doesn't control the Supreme Court. He might pick the candidates for the Supreme Court, but you never know which way they're going to go once they're on the Supreme Court. I mean, look at Eisenhower. He said that, the picks that he had were the worst ever because he wanted them to be conservative. They turned out writing the most liberal decisions there ever were, which was fantastic. But here's, from my standpoint, but here's the situation. Think about, the president says that, but the court has to go along with it. And it is a long stretch for the court to take the New York Times decision out, for example, which is a very important decision in libel law with a lot of specifics. You should be able to criticize people and so on and not easily be sued because people with money can shut you up because they're going to sue you. It's like, I don't like what you're saying. I got a lot of money. I'm going to sue you, and I'm going to win. There's some of that still goes on in the law. But Trump really can't. He can't change that by himself. Listen, look at Roberts. Roberts is on the court now. He surprised everyone with some of his decisions in the First Amendment area. So you're never sure once they get on the court. It's a lifetime job. They can do whatever they want. So we have to hope reason prevails,
Indeed. Kitty, I'm interested for those, if you could share with those who don't know, your father had incredible struggles with the court system and with authorities. What was his opinion of the American legal system?
Let me start by saying that he believed that we had the greatest jury system, court system of the land. That's what he believed, that we had the best government, the best. He had such respect for the law, and he had such. He even went to the point of realizing that you have to speak differently when you're in court, and that the terminology and how things are put across is not the way that it is like us thinking and talking to each other. That there's a particular way that the court is to be addressed.
You sent me papers from your dad.
I did, because
And-
I was loony at my house because of that 1964 trial.
But you can tell, he represented himself in the end. And
Yes.
you can tell from his papers, he still had faith in the system. He was still saying to the Supreme Court, to the Second Circuit, to a
Yeah.
number of courts, look, they did me wrong,
Yep.
do it right,
Yeah.
here's what they violate. Very articulate, by the way, for a non-lawyer. And I read all those papers. And I mean in the law, I don't mean just generally speaking. And he had faith in the system right till the end, there's no
Very
doubt.
much so.
And I
Very
just
much
get the
so.
chills because everything that I've read, here is a guy who was given such a raw deal, and they violated so many of his rights, and not just because they misinterpreted or misapplied the law, but that, like you said, where they lied and did things that were complete miscarriages, but that till the end, he really believed that the system was good and that it would vindicate him, and it failed him. But the words that you said today that I would love to leave everyone with and invite them to go to the National Comedy Center and realize that it's true is Lenny Bruce is still talking.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. Rich, were there any questions that you wanted me to address at the moment, or are we, oh, great. Well,
I did have, I actually had something.
great.
Because I brought something, because I wanted to know, I found this, and I wanted to know if this falls as a free speech thing, or if it's because it's a high school, it doesn't matter.
I'll be reasonable in my charges.
He's billing you
Go
at
ahead.
this point.
Well, an Illinois high school is removing books from reading lists to shield students from sexual content. The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy was the first book to be banned, and some parents are calling for the removal of any work which contains literal, metaphorical, figurative, or allegorical allusions to sex. We can't have 18-year-olds reading about masturbation. I don't care if it's from Dickens or whoever.
Unfortunately, the rules, again, it's almost like the FCC. You know, they said it's pervasive, they cut out a little area. Schools are the same. School zones, there's a lower level. There's even a separate law for obscenity for minors. And that is, does it appeal to the prurient interests of a minor? Does it exceed for a minor? Does it lack for a minor? That kind of thing. So those things occur. Not to the point where they could extinguish everything in the library. And again, that's where the parents have to stand up. And some people challenge it. Some parents have brought lawsuits and indicated this is part of the education process. That's why they're there. There's a library filled with diverse ideas, including hateful things. For example, I'm sure there are books in the library that talk about the Holocaust and talk about all the atrocities that occurred during World War II. What, do you take those out because they're hurtful? No, you educate people so that they can make choices, hopefully the right choices, as you go forward. So it's the same thing with that. So parents have to step forward and say, wait a minute, who said that? You, Reverend Schultz, you're the one that said that? Well, guess what? You don't decide for all of us. We as parents are going to come forward and fight for diversity, information. They're going to be adults at some time. You know, maybe you cut it off at a certain age, but you know what? These days, my wife and I have 6 daughters, okay? And let me tell you something. Some of those at 13 and 14 are saying things and know things, and I'm like, but on the bright side, I'm saying, you know what? They're becoming educated. They're going to make decisions now. They have diverse thoughts. They're exposed to free speech. They're going to make decisions. Hopefully, we can help them make the right ones. That's what school should be about. School should be about educating. And that stuff's out there, and it should be discussed. And it should be discussed in the right forum. So we have to fight. You have to stand up against the government. You got to, when it comes to the First Amendment.
Yes.
And I've been told now that we actually do have a couple of questions that are coming my way shortly. So I'm going to hold the panel for a moment and ask Paul, what do you think is when you say you have to fight the government, the thing that I'm so appreciative of is it is a sliding scale, and things do change, and things aren't the same as they were during Lenny's time, during George's time, where we are now. Where do you see the front lines with respect to the First Amendment?
Well, what's happened, what's really helped, is the internet and the ability to basically pop up everything that there is to see and learn and read about on your computer from wherever. Look, some people get in trouble doing that. You know, they access things like child pornography and so on, which is a total exception to the First Amendment. That is per se illegal, period. There's no weighing anything. And so things like that, fine, but computers have made a huge difference. But you're right, things have changed. You know, Lewis did his routine in front of George Washington and Ben Franklin, they'd have knocked his head off. I mean, that'd have been it. And by the way, they probably would have loved it, but they felt they had to say, oh, Lewis, that's horrible, Lewis. You know, but things change, and we make the change. And you have to be not afraid to be different, and not afraid to speak up for those who are different. You know, you see, we have people, my wife runs a restaurant that we have and so on, right? And some of our servers come in, they got tattoos on and all this stuff, you know. And it's like, okay, you know, it's okay, because they're expressing themselves. And who are we to tell them not to express themselves? I mean, come on, we had white bucks, you know, remember that stuff? You know, you wear a pair of white bucks now, the kids would run away, right? But nevertheless, it was a way of expressing yourself. So we have to be cognizant of that. That's what the First Amendment's all about, accepting differences. That's it. And it's up to us to keep pushing. Push, 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 keep them back. Don't let people tell us what's good for us. We get enough of that. We don't need any more. You know, the one thing that you mentioned to me when we were on the phone, you're talking about Kathy Griffin being punished for that, holding the fake head up of the president and all that stuff. That's totally not a First Amendment area. I mean, no government person stopped her from doing that. So the one thing you have to understand is you may have a free speech right, but you may pay a penalty for what you say. And that penalty could be a social penalty. And in her situation, it was a commercial and social penalty. And that doesn't violate the First Amendment. If the government did something to her because she did that, it'd be a different story. So there can be a punishment for free speech. So you have to be cognizant of that. I mean, I could, you know, I see an old friend of mine, Sam Del Popolo here from Jamestown. I could defame him, I could tell some old stories about you. And he could, I would have free speech, right? But I may pay the penalty because I've defamed him, and he can sue me. So there's a difference there. You know?
I've talked to so many comedians. I've been lucky enough to sit for long periods of time and have conversations with them, and they say, God bless Lenny Bruce. Thank God for Lenny Bruce, because he kept your comedians can't get hauled off and go to jail. But then I talk to comedians and they say, listen, this might not be a First Amendment issue, But it is still a free speech issue. And, you know, there's so many, we could talk all day. We've got so many case studies. Kathy Griffin's one. Gilbert Gottfried's made a living out of losing commercial opportunities for a tweet.
Oh, my God.
You know, and and, you know, I talked to Jimmy Kimmel, who says that he'll be up late at night with his wife sitting on the couch, and he'll go like, honey, I can end it all right now.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh, I've been there.
And I just think it's amazing. It's not a First Amendment right. No one's going to jail, but boy, you can get fired in a big hurry.
Yeah.
So
But,
I just,
you know, here's the problem there is that it's that social media thing. Gilbert types that out to really his followers, which, whatever, it's not 18 million. People following Gilbert, there's like, you got to be a certain twisted individual like myself. You know, you got to be, you know, but it's not a, you know, and then somebody gets it and they tweet it out, and then they tweet it out, and then they tweet it out. This was only meant for these people, really.
but again,
But
that's
but
Lenny
that-
Bruce and the clubs.
Right, yeah.
It's just today's version of that. It's
But
like,
it's,
listen,
yeah, but the nonsense is, it's meant for this, okay? That's who it's meant for. If you think it's so fucking offensive, there's no reason for you to tweet it out. Because why? It's offensive. So, asshole, why are you tweeting it?
Yeah, go ahead and do it.
All right. I just have one question for each of our panelists, and then we have to wrap it up, as much as we could talk for a long time on this. Kitty, the question comes for the people who know about your father's struggles. What motivated him to continue to persevere and relentlessly continue to perform and not change his act and risk being rearrested when he was facing all this persecution?
He felt that he had the right of the First Amendment and for free speech, and that he wasn't doing anything illegal. And it upset him greatly. And he just wanted to be treated fairly in the judicial system and fairly in how he was treated. But he did it because he felt, honest to God, that somebody was going to listen and they would see that this was wrong. You know?
He had something important to say, and he wanted to say it, and that was great.
Absolutely. And that he ultimately, when he got to the finish line, the right result would be there waiting for him.
It was definitely over even before it begun.
Question to Paul. Are there any clients you would refuse to represent, and if so, why?
Yeah, plenty. The good part about having worked hard and all that is that you can make choices. And I've made it very clear for years and years, I never represent anybody who's harmed anybody, like a child or an elderly person or an animal. I'm big on all that. I won't do any of it. Now, if you shoot your wife. No, I make those choices. Now, listen, having said that, and it's because there are people still available to represent people who are charged with those crimes, so that it isn't a matter of if I don't do it, they have no lawyer. There are very dedicated people in the public defender's office and so on who do that sort of work. See, I just couldn't put my heart into it. And that's you've got to, we all do that. You know, your heart's into what you do, same with all of you. If you can't put your heart into it, you shouldn't do it, because then it's fake. And there's no room for fake with a professional who can affect your whole life. All right, I'm not like a surgeon. You could die. What this guy? Who's this? Charles Manson? Oh, sorry, Charles. I nicked that artery, right? But you know, there are individuals who can represent people, so they're covered. The bases are covered, but it can't be me, because I just wouldn't have my heart in, and I wouldn't do it. If I can't have my heart, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. So the answer to that's yes.
Great. And then to Louis, as you are constructing new material, to what extent are you considering the First Amendment or who and how you might offend people?
I don't really. I don't think about it. You know, it's, and that's why, because one person clapping is what I strive for. Just one person, and I want the rest of them to just keep their hands down. And no, I don't think about it. I don't. You know, people always go, "Boy, you're going to play." I'm playing. So I open this year. This year I play Huntsville, Alabama is my opening stop. And everybody goes, "Oh," you know, people go, but it's Huntsville, which is also kind of this. They're all of it's the home of NASA. So there are all of these people there. So it's kind of this blue dot out there, but it's still, I got to get there. So, yeah, and I want, yeah, I do. And it's getting, and I played Oxford, and I was the first comic to play Oxford, Mississippi's theater that I know of because they didn't have any comics work. And then I was the first one, and I kept banging my head to get there. Because it's Oxford, Mississippi. It's the home of like 5 truly great writers, starting with Faulkner. So I'm trying to get to Oxford. They go, and they bring me in first. And I said, shouldn't you have started like with somebody like just so they knew what a joke was? And then build up to someone like me. But I didn't think about it. I never think when I'm in Mississippi or Alabama or any of those places, you know, do you change your act? No, I don't change my act. You know, I just kind of go along and see what see what happens. You know, they kind of know what they're getting into. And the only thing I did think of, and this is really, and this comes with the territory, is when he was elected. He whose name I will not mention. No, there's no reason. And for those of you who might be his fan, the reason I don't say his name is because I know if I do, his ears perk up. But I had more blowback initially from when I'd come on stage and start doing stuff once he was elected. And more blowback than ever. Oh, yeah. And I still get blowback. I said the other day on Colbert, I said that I thought that there should be an amendment that, to the Constitution that during the summer, presidents can't talk to us unless it's really important. So I get back this, I get a whole bunch of responses that, boy, you son of a bitch, you're trying to shut him up. And I'm going, it's a joke I've said about every president since Reagan, asshole. It's a repeated joke, you douchebag. So it's that kind of stuff, and it was kind of, we found that I had to kind of find a way to get them to listen, to kind of draw them in, so that I didn't have to deal. I didn't want to throw them out, and I really kind of wanted to get their attention. And so eventually I found a way in which to kind of do that, but that's the only time, and that's not First Amendment or even, you know, it wasn't even, because offending him was to just say, you know, that we've tried intelligence and now that didn't work. And so our next move was to move on to stupidity. And then, whoa, boy, God damn it! So before you get to that joke, you kind of like want to make the bath a little warmer.
Well, I think that it is a great way to finish this conversation to say that in 2018 and beyond, Louis Black and any other man or woman who gets up on stage can do exactly what he said, not think about it, and that's thanks to Lenny Bruce.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much for coming, everybody. So great to see you.